This is Felix Gamez Garcia and Barnabas Gamez Castro, two Mexicans who had made the gruesome mistake of stealing from the Sinaloa Cartel. For that, they met a fate that was worse than death itself, on camera. But as crazy as that sounds, there's more to this story than you think. Warning: this case contains graphic descriptions of extreme violence and murder. You've been warned.
Next time you decide to give the finger, think about it very carefully, because it's not easy being here, and you can never go back. With these people, you don't play around. The people of El Chapo are not how they say they are.
Yeah, that was one of the victim's voices before he was brutally murdered. And I get it, you're probably asking who they were and how they even ended up in such a bad situation, right? Well, let's rewind a little bit to where it all started. 2011, a video went viral in Mexico of two men. Felix Gamez Garcia and Barnabas Gamez Castro were getting mercilessly beheaded by senior Sinaloa Cartel members. We all know this cartel is one of the most brutal criminal organizations in the world. They're the leading smugglers of cocaine and other hard drugs into the US. They're also involved in other vices like arms dealing, human trafficking, and money laundering. However, once you hear about the Sinaloa Cartel, a familiar name comes to mind: Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. El Chapo is the man solely responsible for this massive growth and expansion of the cartel through the years. But even before El Chapo's reign, there was a man named Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, a federal agent in Mexico that introduced the idea of drug cartels to the country. He founded the Guadalajara cartel in the 1980s and was solely responsible for controlling all the drugs pushed across the US-Mexican border. However, after the capture of Miguel's right-hand man, Rafael Caro Quintero, the Guadalajara cartel began falling apart. But that was just the beginning of a bigger story. April 8, 1989, Miguel Felix was arrested in Mexico on charges of drug trafficking. However, after his arrest, Miguel confided in his lawyer to assemble all the other drug lords in Mexico and assign them their different trafficking routes and territories. Amongst these low-profile drug traffickers was a man named Ismael Zambada Garcia, aka El Mayo, the former leader of the Sinaloa Cartel. El Mayo and El Chapo were both overseeing this cartel, but they were greedy. Their territory somehow interfered with that of the Gulf Cartel. And since the Gulf Cartel wanted nothing to do with the pact made by Miguel Felix, the Sinaloa Cartel broke the pact made within all the cartels, causing the Mexican drug war, and ultimately leading to the death of the cartel members I'll talk about in a moment. So before Felix Gamez and Barnabas Gamez met their fate at the cruel hands of death, they worked for El Chapo and the Sinaloa Cartel. But the biggest mistake they probably made was working for the cartel in the middle of the war. March 2003, the former leader of the Gulf Cartel, Ociel Cardenas, was arrested, leaving the cartel open to attacks. At the same time, they were having internal conflict with Los Zetas, a fraction of their cartel. Then in the years that followed, El Chapo and El Mayo climbed the ranks as Mexico's biggest drug lords. They were looking to expand their drug trafficking routes, and needed the routes formerly covered by the Gulf Cartel. This caused a long and bloody war between both cartels, and believe me when I say, it was just crazy. To put it into context just how crazy it was, over 7,000 people died from casualties. However, along the line, El Chapo won most of the Gulf Cartel's territories, and so he was able to expand his routes. But this expansion meant he needed more men to carry out this dirty job, and that's where Felix and Barnabas came into the picture. Felix and Barnabas were just two poor Mexicans who needed a source of income to survive in the harsh conditions of Mexico. The Mexican drug war caused so much poverty in the country that about 52 million citizens were living below minimum wage. But at the same time, more than 450,000 people worked directly with different cartels, while a lot more depended on the profits from the drug trade to make a living. Now you might find all this irrelevant, but what I'm trying to do here is paint a perfect picture of what it was like in Mexico at that time, and why exactly Felix and Barnabas even got involved with the Sinaloa Cartel in the first place. However, now the question is, what exactly did Felix and Barnabas do for El Chapo and his cartel? The execution. Felix and Barnabas were drug smugglers for the Sinaloa Cartel, and in the viral video that circulated the internet, they claimed they were paid poorly for their work with El Chapo. In fact, they said for their last work, they were paid around just $21. I know, it sounds insane. We have these two guys putting their lives on the line to smuggle cocaine for drug lords who sit in their mansions and stack up billions of dollars in profit generated. Felix Gamez Garcia was a drug smuggler for the Sinaloa Cartel in Phoenix, Arizona. However, on June 11, 2006, he was arrested and charged with possession of illicit drugs. Felix was then deported back to Mexico, but on his return, his involvement with the Sinaloa Cartel got deeper. He began carrying messages for El Cholo, the head of the Nueva Plaza cartel at that time. This cartel was just a fraction of the Sinaloa Cartel, while El Chapo funded their operations. Warning, it's gonna get graphic. In the last few minutes of his life, Felix narrated to his captors how he worked for El Cholo in the Sinaloa Cartel. Then, when he was done, his uncle did the same. Barnabas said he started working for the Sinaloa Cartel through the connection of his nephew, Felix. However, he was just a mere errand boy for El Cholo. And according to his story, he actually never killed anyone. But the main plot of the story is that these men regretted their actions. They regretted working with the cartel and even mingling with them in the first place. They had their backs up against the wall, their torsos bare, their hands tied behind their backs, and their faces void of any emotion or any glimpse of hope to be alive. Then, after 4 minutes of interrogation, the first man drew up a chainsaw and beheaded Barnabas. His blood splashed on Felix, who tried so hard not to look. But as the blood gushing out of Barnabas's decapitated body kept splashing all over his torso, Felix glanced at his uncle's dead body. It will be the last thing he saw before his own life was taken. For Felix, the killers decided to step things up. They resulted in using a machete to make his death slow and painful. So for every slice through his skin, he felt the pain and struggled to stay alive. After 2 long minutes, they were done. Then, his killer picked up his head and placed it on his torso, sending a strong warning to the other Sinaloa Cartel members. That penalty for betrayal was death. Now we'll say this, nothing good comes from watching these videos. In fact, several people have opened up about how traumatizing it can be to watch.
I saw this video when I was young, too young. I can still see and hear it if I try to. Stuff like this shouldn't be accessible online. You get desensitized with age and exposure, but there are still things you can't unsee or unhear.
I remember watching this video like 20 years ago. It haunted me for years.
It is just traumatizing, and anyone with a heart can feel the pity for his uncle and nephew, but not the men who dished out the killing. The video sent shockwaves around Mexico. People were outraged, disgusted, and angry at the Mexican government. But as painful as their deaths were, they aren't the only ones to suffer such a painful death at the hands of the Sinaloa Cartel. The Cardinal. May 24th, 1993. Cardinal Posadas Ocampo was sitting in his car at the Guadalajara International Airport. Then out of nowhere, a gunfire battle broke out in the parking lot. Rival cartel gangs clashed, and the Cardinal was caught in between. He was thought to be one of the drug smugglers, so he was shot 14 times inside his car. His body was wasted with bullets, piercing every corner of his torso. He was murdered in cold blood. But the most painful part about his murder was that no one was charged. However, it was pivotal in El Chapo's first arrest. The Mexican president at the time took it upon himself to stop the drug war, and he knew the only way to stop it was to capture the man leading the war. So he placed a $5 million bounty on El Chapo, circulating his photo across all media platforms. El Chapo was eventually caught en route to escaping with a fake passport, but as we all now know, he escaped 8 years later in 2001. Then after his escape, El Chapo continued waging war against other cartels. One of his most diabolical acts came on September 15, 2008, when 2 hand grenades were thrown onto a crowded plaza, killing 10 people and injuring more than 100. I mean, saying these things just gets me even more vexed. And I'm sure you want to know what exactly the Mexican government is doing to stop these mass killings, right? Well, let's find out. Operation Michoacan. December 11th, 2006, Mexico's newly elected president at the time, Felipe Calderon, sent out 6,500 federal troops to the state of Michoacan to end drug violence there. Now, if you take a look at the Mexican map, Michoacan is close to Jalisco and Guadalajara, and is also southeast of Sinaloa. Michoacan was also one of the major areas troubled by the drug war, so it was paramount that the city was taken down first before military troops could advance to any other part of the country. It was a brave move from Felipe, because this was actually the first time any Mexican president was willing to launch an attack against organized crime in the country. But those consequences were high. Thousands of people died in the process, and a lot of properties were destroyed. Then in 2011, when the video of Felix and Barnabas went viral, the Mexican troops were even more motivated to bring a halt to cartel operations, leading to the capture of over 11,500 alleged cartel members. But in turn, over 40,000 innocent civilians died, and the crime rate across the country doubled. At the same time, there have been some pretty successful operations. For instance, early in 2008, the Mexican Navy was able to intercept a 10-meter-long Narcos submarine traveling about 200 kilometers off the southwest of Oaxaca. This submarine was carrying 5.8 tons of cocaine into the United States before it was spotted by a special force helicopter. However, the real truth is that deaths like that of the Cardinal, Felix, and Barnabas keep on happening because the Mexican government is in some sort of alliance with the cartels. Felix and Barnabas Gamez are just 2 of the thousands of people who have died in this war. It needs to be stopped. Cartels, drug lords, and every Mexican warlord need to be stopped. The question is, how?